200 years ago, Napoleon lost at Waterloo. A quarter-century era of storm and stress came to an end. Everyone knows about the Napoleonic Wars. But what would the world organized by him have looked like? I dislike the common cliché, history doesn't entertain the subjunctive mood. Of course, we can't change the past. But we study history to decide how to be and how to live on. It's quite interesting and instructive to analyze not only the facts but also alternative scenarios. And there's always an alternative until the present and the future become the past. Napoleon had a chance to win at Waterloo if Grouchy had hurried and Blücher had been delayed. But he had no chance to win the war. During the 100 Days, Napoleon managed to mobilize 128,000 men, while the combined forces of the Allies, excluding reserves, amounted to 700,000. Even if the English and the Prussians had been defeated, the Russians and Austrians would have arrived in reinforcement. By that time, the train had already left the station. But what would have happened if Alexander I, not just in words but in deeds, had joined the Tilsit system, which promised Russia great benefits even according to the assessment of the Slavophile and patriot Nikolai Danilevsky? Or if he had wavered in 1812 and sought peace? Or if Napoleon had not, according to the near-unanimous opinion of researchers, made the fatal mistake and halted near Smolensk? Of course, on the path to world domination, there remained one more obstacle: England. However, French shipyards could build up to 20 warships a year, more modern and powerful than those in the British fleet, accurately depicted in the movie Master and Commander. What was lacking were experienced admirals, officers, and sailors, but essentially, Napoleon simply ran out of time. He had already thought about the future of Britain, stating on St. Helena to his Dr. O'Meara that he intended to make its homeland a republic, abolish the privileges of the aristocracy and the House of Lords, and ensure equal rights for Protestants and Catholics. Additionally, nearly a century before the emergence of Zionism, he was one of the first global politicians to propose the idea of recreating Israel. The second attempt. Some believe that history has seen three great attempts to unify Europe: ancient Rome, Napoleon, and the third being attempted before our very eyes by the European Union. Contemporary Russian writer and historian, Alexander Nikanov, titled his work on the Corsican as Napoleon. The second attempt. The primary source of information on the post-war plans of the unfulfilled unifier is the book Memorial of St. Helena. Its author, Count Emmanuel de Las Cases, followed his idol into exile and recorded his words for 6 years. It was for a great purpose: to end randomness and start tranquility. A new horizon, new labors would have opened up, full of prosperity and well-being for all, Napoleon dictated to Las Cases. Content and at peace everywhere, I too would have had my Viennese Congress and my Holy Alliance. These are thoughts that were stolen from me. In the Assembly of States, we would have discussed our interests as a family and treated the people as a scribe treats his master. Europe would soon comprise a single people, and anyone traveling would always find themselves in a common homeland. I intended to create such a Europe where citizens would have one nationality and could move from one end to the other with a single passport. I would have decreed that all rivers be navigable for all, that the sea was communal, that the constant large armies be reduced solely to the guards of the sovereigns. Returning to France, I would have declared its borders immutable. Any new expansion would be anti-national. My dictatorship would have ended, and constitutional rule would have begun. Isn't that the European Union? On the eve of the anniversary of Waterloo, an article titled "Napoleon Dreamed of a Visa-Free Regime" appeared in the RU-Net. Leo Tolstoy, in War and Peace, did not hesitate to provide an extensive quote, only to immediately denounce it as a pitiable attempt at self-justification. Well, he had a well-known distaste for Napoleon, not so much for waging war against Russia, but more as the antithesis of his own life philosophy of inaction and non-resistance. But why not assume that Napoleon said what he believed? Effective manager. How feasible was the brave new world, even if Napoleon had managed to defeat everyone on the battlefield? Many perceive him by nature as a conqueror and adventurer, not a creator. In modern Russia, Bonaparte is sometimes compared to Boris Yeltsin, who supposedly shone in moments of crisis and danger, but in ordinary times began to get bored and work with documents. Napoleon undoubtedly loved to wage war, as any person loves doing what they excel at. However, he was also capable of methodical peaceful work, as the facts show. Despite military expenses, the French economy flourished. In 1812, the trade balance was recorded with a surplus of 126 million francs. Steel production doubled, and coal extraction increased fivefold. The life I lead greatly saddens me, being taken into camps and campaigns, it takes me away from the main subject of my concerns. Good organization related to banks, manufacturing, and trade, Napoleon wrote to Finance Minister Gordon in 1805. The list of highways, ports, bridges, and canals built or modernized during his 14-year reign takes up 2.5 pages. The number of free spots in educational institutions doubled. Many innovations of that time, from the Bank of France to the Legion of Honor, still function today. The Civil Code, created with Napoleon's personal participation in 4 months and, with some modifications, still effective in France, he considered his best monument. Exact sciences and invention were generously funded. The noblest and most useful occupation is to promote the establishment of new knowledge and ideas, said Napoleon. But there was another, more significant obstacle: power and freedom. Napoleon knew how to create a good life. But he lacked the experience of the 20th century. He only had the old experience, which hindered rather than helped, writes Alexander Nikanov. To this, one might add that perhaps he also lacked the desire to abandon this old experience. The unified Europe that Napoleon built would not have been a confederation of equal nations, but an empire. Paris would have been the capital of the world, and the French would have been the envy of all nations, he told Las Cases. How long other nations would have tolerated this remains a rhetorical question. Napoleon was not a racist like Hitler, nor did he impose a social utopia like Stalin. But people still resist coercion, even when coerced for their own good. The system he was creating was almost entirely reliant on him and was unstable, like a pyramid balancing on its tip. Napoleon himself once noted that the French believe in the emperor but don't believe in the empire. What to say about the whole of Europe? Napoleon could not win because he triumphed solely through his personal genius. Someday Europe would have broken him, believes Nikanov. If not him, then his weak and incapable son. Of course, it might have been tolerated. After all, how would Napoleon's empire have differed from the Austria of the time, where 6 million Germans ruled over 28 million non-Germans? But most likely, in the long run, nothing would have come of Napoleon's project. Although the inoculation of progress, internationalism, and civil equality to the world probably wouldn't have hurt. The third attempt to end wars, to make borders conditional, to establish common sensible laws differs from the first two in that it is based on voluntary association. Hence, it stands a better chance. At least, one wants to believe so. Napoleon's dream is coming true. But truly durable changes are brought about not by power but by freedom, reason, and law. The sun will rise. Alexander Hazen said that every time he looked at the popular lithograph where Wellington and Blücher were congratulating each other on the victory at Waterloo, he felt a cold dread in his chest. How could they not rejoice? They had just pushed history off the main road deep into the mud, and such mud from which it would not emerge for half a century, Hazen wrote. After the fall of the Colossus, a wild reactionary spirit prevailed in Europe. King Charles X of France openly expressed his desire to revert to the times of Louis the Saint, and claimed to have personal conversations with the Holy Virgin, who advised him to abolish parliamentarism and freedom of the press. In Russia, serfdom was further entrenched. Why reform or modernize when we are already great? In Spain, the Inquisition was officially reinstated. In Hanover, torture was reintroduced, while in the Papal States, on the contrary, smallpox vaccination and street lighting were abolished simply because they had been introduced by the French. Yet, in France, this regression lasted 15 years, in Germany, 30 years, and in Italy and Russia, half a century. Manuscripts don't burn, and good ideas don't die, with or without their originators. After the night, dawn always follows. When the winds of change blow, one shouldn't spit against them but set the sails. Napoleon in the New World. An intriguing hypothetical related to Waterloo is described by the American historian Alistair Horn. After losing his final battle in Europe, Napoleon contemplated fleeing to the USA. He arrived at the port of Rochefort, where 2 frigates awaited. The way to the ocean was blocked by superior forces of the British fleet. The captains approached Napoleon and proposed a gamble. The emperor would try to escape on one ship, while the other would engage and, for as long as possible, delay the British. The second frigate would likely be doomed, but they and their men were prepared for that sacrifice. The plan was risky, but there was a chance. Napoleon responded that he felt entitled to ask the French to give their lives for their homeland, but not for his personal salvation. But what if he had managed to reach American shores? Napoleon was only 46, incredibly proactive, and would certainly not have wanted to lie low in exile. In the USA, there was a strong pro-French faction which viewed Britain as a recent oppressor. This faction included figures like Thomas Jefferson. In Louisiana, which Napoleon had sold to the young republic in 1803, comprising not just modern-day Louisiana but 14 southern states, French culture remained influential. With his fame and authority, Napoleon could have become, if not a ruler, then the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army, trying to seize Canada from England and Latin American colonies from Spain and Portugal, thereby creating a new empire for himself. The practical-minded Yankees might not have wanted to engage in war. But had this alternate history played out, another decisive battle between Napoleon and Wellington could have occurred, this time across the ocean, a battle that Napoleon might very well have won. In this scenario, Horn writes, the United States we know today would never have existed. Instead, there would be a different country, less Anglo-Saxon, less democratic, dominated by Southern planters, with its capital not in Washington, but in New Orleans. Interestingly, while Napoleon himself didn't leave a mark on U.S. history, a member of his dynasty did. The grandson of his younger brother Jerome, Charles Bonaparte, an American citizen, served as the Attorney General under Theodore Roosevelt and founded the FBI in 1908.